this video we'll discuss how a single update could potentially devastate a $2 billion business we know as World of Tanks. World of Tanks is a popular online multiplayer game where players engage in tank battles in various modes, such as random battles, team battles, and clan wars. As with many other free-to-play games, monetization plays a crucial role in sustaining the game's development, server costs, and profitability. This is all fair and square, as Wargaming, the developer of World of Tanks, is a business after all, and they are here to make money. However, the problem is that greed can lead game developers down a road where prioritizing monetization strategies leads to overly poor gameplay quality. In World of Tanks' case, the focus on implementing pay-to-win mechanics or loot boxes instead of creating a fun and balanced game experience. Greed can also lead to rushed development cycles that prioritize hitting release deadlines over properly testing and polishing the game. This can result in game mechanics or assets that are completely broken or unfinished products that fail to live up to player expectations. The same greed can cause many of the game's diverse aspects to become overly pay-to-win, which generally describes a situation where a player can gain an advantage over others by spending real money on in-game items or currency. This is a very common practice in free-to-play MMOs, and so these items or currencies can give a player a clear edge over others in the game, such as more powerful weapons, higher levels, or better equipment, which can make it easier to win in the game. Needless to say, this practice ends up being extremely toxic to a game's balance and leads down a road of issues and decreased player happiness. The next patch Wargaming is planning to release can easily be described by these aforementioned principles, as it is nothing short of an absolutely pay-to-win, untested mess that is infested with game design decisions that are completely surreal and just plain incompatible with how core game features function. Back in the day, when World of Tanks would get a massive patch, people would be very excited, since this usually meant the addition of a new tech tree branch, also known as a bunch of new vehicles freshly out the oven for the player base to get. On the contrary, very recently, most updates have been received with extreme negativity by a good portion of the community, and for good reason, especially in this case. WoT Plus. One of the biggest changes that this update includes is WoT Plus. World of Tanks already has a premium subscription-based service that provides players with various benefits and advantages, such as the increased in-game currency and experience earnings for each battle played, reduced costs for vehicle repairs, and some more. This was always a widely accepted monetization tool for Wargaming, but the changes WoT Plus brings are absolutely game-breaking in a lot of ways. A huge pay-to-win aspect of WoT Plus is the ability to demount special bond equipment for free. As of now, such equipment can only be demounted by paying 200 bonds every time, and this is widely regarded as a balance factor for both the game's economy and in-game mechanics. As of now, the average player is very careful and considerate when buying bond equipment, and even more so when they choose which tank to equip with said expensive stuff. If someone pays for WoT Plus, he will now only need a single set of equipment, 3 pieces to move between all of their tanks, for completely free. As of now, you have to spend a considerable amount of time gathering bonds through different means of gameplay. This new feature of WoT Plus essentially renders all this effort and time completely wasted, and many players feel like it's a spit in their face, not to mention the fact that now there will be a constantly growing edge between superior and inferior equipment, and this may prove catastrophic when newer players encounter users of the WoT Plus feature. Another reason that stands against the free demounting of bond equipment is that players as of now have to make a choice between purchasing expensive superior equipment or bidding for different exclusive tanks. There are some tanks that are constantly available for pickup in the pawn shop, but there are also ones that can only be bid for after competitive tournaments, so-called campaigns. After every campaign, the top X% of the overall participants gets to choose an exclusive vehicle, and the Y% that did not reach the goals needed to be eligible to choose tanks get to instead bid for them. Needless to say, the competitive bid prices of these vehicles will absolutely skyrocket, and the player no longer has to be considerate about how they spend their bonds. This change essentially destroys a portion of a very delicate part of the game's economy. The feature also allows players to ban an additional map and gives every WoT Plus subscriber 500 gold that will be collectible from their in-game coffers every week. The subscription model also comes with free crew training, where a user will be able to select a tank whose crew members will each passively receive additional crew XP, regardless of whether said user is offline, in battle, or just in the garage. Frankly, this does sound like another clear pay-to-win feature, and on top of that is also a little ridiculous. Last but not least, WoT Plus subscribers will gain access to the TS-54, a double-barreled American Tier 8 heavy tank without a clear turret weak spot and insanely good gun handling, which are all characteristics of Wargaming's recent, questionable premium tank policy, which we will also cover shortly. The tank is the first one in the game that can accommodate any kind of American crew member, no matter which vehicle type they come from, so long as their major qualifications match. It could be argued that this is also a very strange, albeit very useful feature, sparking FOMO or fear of missing out in some players' minds. The subscription model cannot be purchased with in-game currency, only with real money. it will cost €8.10 per month on the European server and the equivalent on the North American cluster. It's important to mention that not all players dislike WoT Plus, and many find the service to be a worthwhile investment that enhances their gameplay experience. However, all these arguably pay-to-win benefits provided by WoT Plus create an unfair advantage for those who can afford to pay for the service, and also leads to frustration among players who feel that the game is becoming ever increasingly pay-to-win. The new crew system. The crew system in World of Tanks is a crucial component that affects the performance of your tanks. The crew consists of several members, including a commander, gunner, loader, driver, and a radio operator, each of whom comes with a different set of skills and whom has a specific role to play in the operation of your tank. As you play more and more battles in your tanks, you can earn XP for your crew members, which can be used to increase their skills and improve their performance. For example, you can improve your gunner's accuracy, your driver's maneuverability, or your loader's reloading speed. The crew skills and the entire system is one of the only core game mechanics of the game that has not been messed with thoroughly. The crew system has always been simple and easy to understand after doing just 5 minutes of research, and is in my opinion kind of well balanced. The second biggest change in the update is the addition of new crew skills and the partial overhaul of pre-existing ones. This game suffers from a multitude of potentially game-breaking problems, such as invisible textures blocking shots, loads of imbalanced tanks, ghost shells, and the list could go on for much longer, yet for some odd reason, Wargaming keeps telling themselves that the community is screaming for an update regarding the crew system. There will be 8 new crew skills, some of them are must-haves for competitive gameplay, including some older ones that have been ignored in the past. But all in all, they are extremely useful in random battles too. With the addition of more skill possibilities for each crew member, one would expect that they are going to significantly reduce the amount of XP for each consecutive perk. This is not the case at all, however, as the required amounts of crew XP will stay completely unchanged, thus creating some absolutely ridiculous numerical requirements to progress after obtaining the first few skills. As a quick example, you need around 7 million free XP to get to the 7th skill. Tanks with fewer crew members suffer even more as more skills are needed to make them competitive, but all those extra skills will only have 2 or 3 crew members to master them instead of 4 or 5. This places a lot more pressure on every player, since in order to grind those skills on their crew, one will need to spend substantially more time playing the game. Wargaming has been trying to lessen the gap between newer and older players, but as we can imagine, this change will do the exact opposite. We will not go into complete detail regarding each new and updated crew skill, but will highlight a few new, completely broken mechanics. The crew skill snapshot has been doubled in effectiveness and now provides a tremendous amount of boost to gun handling. The perk Deadeye provides increased critical hit chance and has been buffed from 3 to 10% and now works with HE shells too, along with Eagle Eye, which gives an extra 5% to critical hit chance. Thanks to these two combined skills, players will now knock out more internal modules, and this phenomenon will unfortunately produce even more frustration for the receiving party. Furthermore, broken tanks and tanks that rely on HE, like the FE4005, will be buffed even more as a result. All skills except Brothers in Arms now scale off buffs to crew percentage, which can be improved with the usage of different assets like Vents, Commander bonus, Brothers in Arms, the Vent Directive, and rations. This means you can get up to minus 41% to gun dispersion on turret traverse, plus 20.2% to critical hit chance, or roughly plus 7 or 8 seconds to how long you can spot someone. These values are completely ridiculous in terms of balancing and give the sense of the developers not being familiar with their own game's core mechanics and delicate balance. As mentioned before, the crew system has yet to be reworked even with all these new skills, which means for tanks with 2 or 3 crew members you will need many more skills than before to be competitive. Not changing the crew system also gives tanks with 5 or 6 crew members a significant advantage over tanks with fewer crew members, especially in tanks where the commander or loader has multiple roles. As this is an unintended effect of the crew change, it creates an unnecessarily widening gap between those different tanks. At the moment on the test server, players are given only 12 retraining orders, which means that each player is only able to retrain the skills of 12 of their crew members for free. If someone wants to retrain more of their crew, they simply have to pay. This may change in the future though, as people are understandably very upset about this. Quick update. Wargaming has made an update where they state that every player will have 30 days to reset their crew members for free. This would not be a bad change, however the article itself feels downright insulting toward the players. This entire PR update serves to save face and somehow justify their horrible game design decisions. Wargaming tells us that monetization was never part of the crew rework plan, yet they struggled to even consider free resetting of crew members until they got pressured into it by the community. The article depicts Wargaming as some overlord who should be praised by their peons for granting them a free crew reset after this awfully negligent overhaul. Frankly, this new article is absolutely ridiculous, and it even contradicts itself, saying that having the ability to learn all perks shouldn't be reachable, but later it states, we don't want to limit the system. They do limit the system, however, as they never bother to even look into how much crew XP is needed to tap into the 5th, 6th, or even 7th skills later on. All in all, the updated crew system is more complex than the previous one, which is making it more difficult for some players to understand and manage, and is also widening the gap between newer and older players unnecessarily. Random events. There is also a new type of activity during which various events take place on the battlefield. They occur at a specific time and in a specific area allocated for this. Depending on the map, such events may be, for example, the crashing of a ship or zeppelin or the arrival of a train. There may be one or several random events in one battle. Each random event changes the environment around the players as well as the combat situation on the map. For example, if a plane crashes into a building, debris can block a passage. On the other hand, it might provide additional cover for your vehicle. This may allow you to unexpectedly break into the rear of the enemy team or more successfully deter the attacks of your opponents. Shortly before the start of the random event, the area in which it will occur will be framed in a red border with a timer notification. Once the countdown starts, you will have some time to escape from the area, otherwise your vehicle will be destroyed. This feature seems to try to resolve some map balancing issues, but instead of changing and overhauling the maps themselves, they created these random events that really do feel unnatural and forced, and to some extent completely ridiculous. We do not know the official reasoning for such a massive change, and it only affects just a handful of maps for now, but I believe that they are trying to improve the monotony of some matches, which are bred by the fact that certain maps are just creating too many stalemates on the battlefield. This may serve as a way to dislodge campers and remove overpowered positions where normally the player would be too hard to dig out from. They may also want to use this for marketing purposes. They could try selling the game to the public with their new dynamic objects and destructions, a feature that bears a close resemblance to how some of the Battlefield titles function. Why doesn't Wargaming just fix the maps though? They certainly would have the knowledge if they had just picked highly regarded players of the community and consulted with them about all the maps and what to fix. This would certainly prove to be a more resource efficient way in my view. Dynamic cover. Another feature that directly correlates with these events is the addition of dynamic cover. From now on, you will be able to push and hide your weak spots behind certain objects in front of you, essentially shielding yourself from incoming fire. This change doesn't seem that negative, but we'll have to see how this works in practice. Yet again, the implementation seems to resolve and place a band-aid on core problems with the maps themselves. Unpushable corridor maps and huge fields with no cover will finally have some more variety in terms of gameplay progression. But instead of just fixing these maps, Wargaming treats the symptoms of their patient without addressing the root of the problem itself. Japanese TDs. The new Japanese TD tech tree is also going to be hitting the live server, and in fact this is the feature that bears the most positivity in the entire update. If you feel like checking them and their stats out, I recommend visiting kajzoo.gg. I won't waste your time explaining them in detail, even though they don't feel overpowered, they are interesting enough to research, so Wargaming is due at least some credit for their creation. The crown jewel of the tech tree is the Hori, which plays similarly to the Jagdpanzer E100. It is worthwhile to mention, however, that the Kari, which is a tier 8 premium that was released way earlier and which was only obtainable through the means of gambling, is significantly more powerful than its tier 8 counterpart. Unfortunately, this is not a new phenomenon in this game. Wargaming's recent monetization policy. Finally, I'd like to address and talk about Wargaming's recently increased monetization policy concerning their frequent releases of paid content. Just in the last 4 months, Wargaming has significantly upped the amount of paid content they've released. We had loads of gambling, including the Holiday Ops, the Waffenträger, and the Shamrock Boxes events. On top of this, we recently saw the introduction of NFTs into the game with the release of the Lion and Object 780 tanks with unique numbers on them, which if you think about is a super cheap way to make a ton of money. We've also had the T832 behind the paywall and a bunch of auctions and daily deals. Wargaming's recent selling strategy was to spark FOMO, fear of missing out, in one's mind and use that to incentivize more and more players to buy or gamble for these exclusive products. Let's talk a bit about the Waffenträger event. The Waffenträger of E100 was an autoloader German tier 10 TD that had a special 2.8k damage autoloading clip. Wargaming replaced it many years ago with the Gorilla and the tech tree and thus removed it from the game. Recently, the tank has been added back into the game files and made available for a maximum of 50 playable battles through the means of selling keys for loot boxes for the chance of obtaining it temporarily. People went to insane lengths to try to get as many battles in it as possible, and this is a perfect example of the FOMO strategy Wargaming has been using for these past few months. I am an advocate for paid content as long as said content is not game breaking or is not essential for a normal player to get. With the release of tanks like the BZ-176 or the WoT Plus system, we unfortunately have to say that they do not belong under the aforementioned category. I am not exactly sure why this increased monetization is taking place suddenly. Is there a higher up that wants to quit the game and make as much money as possible before he leaves? Is it investors demanding Wargaming to maintain margins through a dwindling player base? Is it a select few that just want to milk the player base as much as possible and know they can get away with it? No one knows for sure, but one thing is certain. Policies and updates outlined in this video definitely paint the nefarious picture of the game's future. Summary and World of Tanks' future. It is painfully obvious that a good portion of the player base is unhappy with the direction Wargaming has taken with their game. The company is in a very fortunate state as World of Tanks still doesn't have a direct arcade tank shooter competitor on the market, so they don't have to tend to the players' happiness as much as other titles with rivals. Truthfully, it feels like the company is wanting to turn an extra profit at the cost of a substantial amount of player loss. This whole scheme does look like a short-term thing only, and they will not be able to make the game more popular and attract more players, let alone keep their current ones happy if they continue going down the road of these recent changes. Wargaming needs to perform a complete overhaul of their tanks in all tiers. What I mean by that is that they need to develop a weight system and bring each tank closer to one another in terms of gameplay balance and playability. The very same weight system later on could also be used to develop the matchmaking, so teams don't end up with 3 highly competitive tanks on the opposing side with none on theirs. Furthermore, the current map pool is absolutely tragic, as they have very little to no variety in terms of flanking, and general enjoyability is at an all-time low. Corridor maps and maps with huge open, unusable spaces have to go. They also need to introduce more usable maps based on the old ones they have removed. Windstorm, Northwest, South Coast, the Chinese maps, and Stalingrad are all great examples of how diverse their map designs used to be, and players including myself truly enjoyed them. I really love this game, even though it feels like it is getting worse and worse with every update. Wargaming's greed has been gradually taking its toll on the gameplay experience, especially with the complete destruction of the game's balance. There is a general need of fresh air that would somehow override all the negative stuff. I've always been an advocate for the introduction of Tier 11 and Tier 12 along with modern tanks and possibly new mechanics. I am sure many people would appreciate such a change, but it does seem to me that Wargaming chooses the easy way of making money by simply limiting their financial investment into a game and just doing bare minimum. We can only guess what the future holds for this game, but if they fail to reconcile with the player base, World of Tanks' fate is all but certain. Lastly, I do not support WoT Plus nor any of the monetized content that is overly paid to win that will come in the future. I suggest you do the same. Do not support this desperate milking of the player base. The game should have a soul, and the developer should be responsible for keeping it healthy for the majority of the player base to enjoy. If they manage to do this, only then will they deserve our support.